Day 5 of Microsoft versus the FTC got incredibly spicy during the closing arguments. I pulled what I think are the best quotes from closing. The judge goes after Jim Ryan. The judge goes after the FTC, saying it's their job to protect consumers. Let's dive right into all this. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to go right to the quotes. The first is that the FTC failed to explain how Microsoft's plan hurts consumers. The FTC said, if your honor determines that Microsoft is a profit maximizing corporation and that it will use valuable content to aid its shareholders, which is its right insofar as that goes, then the evidence will have shown that the incentives are to use that content to benefit the platforms, and in doing so will harm competition because it will take that content and make it day and date. How does that harm consumers? The judge asked. Now, the consumer, if the deal goes through, has to find some of the content only on the Game Pass. Judge, like Sony does with Activision, right? I mean, we have testimony to that. They take money from other platforms and delay. Beth Wilkinson was just sitting there the whole time like, let them cook. I just think of the meme where that guy is like just smoking the cigarettes in the car or whatever. And I had to laugh during that exchange because it was so spicy, but what a great one to start on. But it gets better. The FTC compared Call of Duty to Elder Scrolls. Judge. So let's talk about ZeniMax. So which ZeniMax title is comparable to Call of Duty in that when it was acquired by Microsoft, it was a multi-platform multiplayer game? FTC, the best example of the 3 to 4 that they've talked about bringing exclusive is the Elder Scrolls. They'll tell you it's not comparable because it's an expansion pack or it's a different kind of title, but that one we think is one of the most like Call of Duty. Note that she said multiplayer game, not single player game, and they went right to Elder Scrolls. Anyway, continuing on, I said Judy, it's Judge. So that was ZeniMax, and it's currently, there's Elder Scrolls 6 coming out. It's not yet launched. Mr. Spencer's testified on our examination that they would have it be exclusive. So what happened here was, I'm just going to make sure I didn't cut anything off, was Beth Wilkinson was able to respond to this a little bit later on. Microsoft followed up on this topic. Beth, this is Beth Wilkinson, the Microsoft attorney. I refer to her as Beth in these notes. When you were asking about ZeniMax and asked him to find a game that was most similar to Call of Duty, he mentioned Elder Scrolls. That is incorrect. There are 2 Elder Scrolls games. One is online, Elder Scrolls Online. That is a multiplayer game. It's on PlayStation today. Microsoft has published new add-ons and separate games that is available. The game he's talking about, Elder Scrolls 6, she said 16, that's coming out right now. The projected release, that's not coming out right now. The projected release is 2026. That's a single player game. So it's not similar to Call of Duty, which, as you know, is a multiplayer and multi-platform game. So the one version of Elder Scrolls that is similar is on PlayStation and always has been. I found this notable because I wondered why they just didn't mention Bungie. The profit is there for a game like Destiny 2, and I would have to theorize that part of the reason that they acquired that property was so that they could monetize across multiple platforms. That's Sony's play. That's Microsoft's play. The math adds up. So it doesn't really make any sense. By the way, if you've been enjoying these, I got to switch my profile here because I had to make a whole new profile just to do this. Hit the subscribe button. The subscribe button's not working again. You're letting me down, subscribe button. Anyway, hit that subscribe button. Pretend it worked, okay? Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell to know when my content goes live. Thank you so much for watching. If you're already subscribed, hit the like button to know when content goes live and help the channel grow. Let's get back into quotes. So we just talked about the Elder Scrolls follow-up. Now, the judge questioned if they'd even be there if Sony signed that 10-year deal. Judge. So if Sony actually had an agreement with Microsoft, the 10-year to keep Call of Duty and future versions of Call of Duty on PlayStation and future versions of PlayStation, would we be here? Well, we might be here because we need to evaluate that agreement. Let's say it's an agreement and they're going to abide by it, and therefore Call of Duty will be on PlayStation all the iterations from now for 10 years. Would we be here? FTC, I think we would still have had an investigation. Well, that's good. But here on a preliminary injunction, well, we would be here because of the other markets. Okay. Outside the platform market. Okay. That's fair. Basically, they didn't do a tremendously great job of convincing the judge that they would need to have this whole trial if it wasn't about Call of Duty, if the Call of Duty contract would have been signed by PlayStation, right? So that was somewhat notable. She brought up how NVIDIA loving the deal sounds pro-competitive. Judge, I guess more I'm thinking of the AT&T case from the DC circuit, and in which that's the closest thing I think we have the Court of Appeals case addressing the impact of proposed agreements to address concerns raised by regulators. Anyway, that the district court discounted the FTC's expert opinion because that expert did not take into account the agreements. There's a myriad of ways those agreements do not save this deal. Okay, but so can we just, from a legal point of view, because your brief in support of the preliminary injunction, I think, was a little broad and it claimed they essentially couldn't be considered or relevant. And I'm not prepared to go there based on the law, but if you want to try and persuade me, that's fine. She also brought up the Illumina case and the prima facie case, or terminology. We never heard any analysis of the competitive effects of these deals. We never heard anyone from a third party with whom they signed these deals come and say, this deal is magnificent. Well, NVIDIA, Mr. Eisler said that he was satisfied with it. And she's pointing out that the people who did sign the contracts are actually happy with their contracts. I'm going in the wrong order, so let's start back here. Jim Ryan got called out by the judge. Judge, what do you say, though, to Mr. Ryan, who said that Starfield or whatever feels like there was nothing anti-competitive about Microsoft making that exclusive under what you just said to me that is anti-competitive? So the FTC is going against their own witness, saying that Jim Ryan doesn't think it's anti-competitive, but you do. The FTC said, I don't know the basis for why Mr. Ryan was less upset about that one than Call of Duty. Judge, because he does the same thing. The FTC said, they do. Mr. Nadella said, that's how the market is. You're right. That's the market. It has benefits for players. I assume if you're a video game player, ultimately, if everybody's in a kind of arms race with each other to get the contents and make it neat for their platform or their console gamers benefit, because now there's more neat things to play. The concern here is if you take away the competition and now instead of people competing for neat things to play, if you want at least some of those neat things, you've got to go to Xbox. But that's what Sony is doing now, I think was the judge's point. And the judge kind of got mad at the FTC. So Beth had a chance to sort of go on this rant, right? And it's pretty glorious. But it's really unfair for the FTC, who had an agreement with us and knows that there will be no more discovery, there will be no more analysis if we have to go in front of Judge Chappell. That's the next case. But the real question is, they do have the burden of doing a partial foreclosure analysis if that's their claim. And it's an easy but wrong answer to say they can't do it. The FTC is arguing that, oh, we can't actually prove this. Beth continues. There are examples out there. They could have looked at what happened when we took Ghostwire exclusive, Final Fantasy 16. We just lost part of that game because this year it didn't go on Xbox. It did last year. They could look at Minecraft, as they pointed out, where we didn't have an update for the PlayStation 5. So there are many ways, and I'm not, as everyone has been saying, an economist, but that is their job to figure that out. And to say that you want to stop a $69 billion transaction, but you can't figure out what the harm will be, I think that answers the question. I mean, if they can't figure out what the harm is, what they're turning to you or to us to say, you should figure it out, it's too hard. Like what? I mean, no witness said there was going to be partial foreclosure. No one said that. No one had any examples of it. And if it's the partial exclusivity, as you said, as Mr. Nadella said, I thought the best, that's the world we live in because Sony is the market leader and that's what they do. So there are partial, if that's what they want to call partial foreclosures. That's happening all the time with these partial exclusivity or timed exclusivity agreements, and that's part of competition. It's not part of anti-competitive behavior. That's the argument that the FTC has to make, right? They have to prove anti-competitive behavior, and they're failing to do so. The FTC got called out. Now, this was right before the break, and it was one of the most surprising moments in my opinion. So the FTC is saying we put in enough evidence to raise a substantial question about whether there will be a partial foreclosure given the incentives. And again, defendants always want to conflate this too. Has the government shown that X is guaranteed to happen? We are talking about the future. The Supreme Court in Philadelphia National said, I'm talking about probabilities here, not certainties. So we will not accept a burden that we must and will show. We are going to talk about probabilities and show that there will be a probability of a substantial lessening of competition. I'm getting some notes. Somebody was handing him some notes physically. One is the merger is permanent. Judge, I don't want you... I want you to know you won't, Judge, I know you won't be scared off because of the size of the deal for making the right ruling, but the merger is permanent. Once they decide to merge, they come together. We've heard about the harms, for example, to Sony in terms of optimization. Judge interrupts him. Well, it's not about the harm to Sony we care about. It's the harm to consumers. And then they said, Mr. Knox, you need a break, right? That's the stenographer, I'm guessing, in the trial. That was pretty significant. The judge interrupting and reminding the FTC that you're bringing up Sony again. And there's been a lot of criticism online where people have counted the amount of times that the FTC brought up Sony versus the amount of times that they brought up consumers. And it's a bad optics play. And even the judge is starting to pick up on it, is my read there. Now, I might have read this quote. NVIDIA's loving the deal. The judge asked why PC is not a relevant market, a fellow PC gamer. I appreciate it. The judge was great, by the way. She's like really fun to listen to. Let's talk about the relevant market then for Gen 9. And I guess why I'm struggling there is because you can play a lot of these games on PC and the Nintendo console. And so can you give me a case in which a relevant market didn't include something like an input. I can play on my PlayStation, my PC, and my Xbox, but you say the PC is not part of the market. FTC says the consumer in this example is looking for a video game console. They're not going to go off and buy a $1,500 PC. What if they already have a PC? The judge says. They already have a PC? They got super thrown off by the question. In other words, why isn't everybody, particularly in 2023, and I would also guess that particularly with people who play Call of Duty, are likely to already own a PC, right? So they don't have to buy one. FTC says one is the gaming PC is not a run-of-the-mill PC, a run-of-the-mill that you go and get the bargain basement for $200, $400, $500. The judge says, okay, I get that. And maybe I'm biased in the world that I live in the world we've all lived in during the pandemic where everybody went home, everybody did their work from home. Nobody did it on a bargain basement PC. Everybody had a $1,000, $1,500 PC. Why wouldn't that have some sort of influence on the downward price of Xbox? Now, my read on that is she's trying to point out what's pretty obvious to the rest of us. Like, people have options in terms of their console, or they already have a PC, and she's wondering why wasn't that data included in the analysis? And she really pressed the FTC to make their point, and they didn't do that very well because they went back and forth about the Switch and COD and all these deals. Like, why aren't the deals being taken into account? And I don't think the FTC got there in terms of persuading her one direction or the other. There was like maybe a point or two where they got close, but let's continue on with the rest of the quotes. The Switch was also a hot button topic. Big surprise, right? So the judge says, when they go to Best Buy and it's on the shelf and we've got the PlayStation, the X, the S, and the Nintendo Switch, and I'm looking the Switch, but look, I can get this entry into next Gen 9, right? The FTC says the Switch is not the same as Gen 9 consoles. They're talking about the S and the Switch being comparable. The judge says, well, it's not the same. In many ways, it's better, right? Because you can actually still hook it up to your TV and take it on the airplane. The FTC says, but the content is quite dissimilar between the Switch and others. Nintendo's whole strategy is about having Mario and Zelda and the family-friendly games. And there are overlaps, of course. Beth sort of had a rebuttal, and I'm taking out a lot of the talk from the FTC on this one. The council is just wrong. The most popular games are on both. Nintendo has some different features, as you heard Mr. Kotick admit, that he didn't quite see as benefits, but the price is one of the most important things that consumers look at. You heard many people, including Mr. Kotick, say the free-to-play games are the most popular ones. Fortnite, FIFA, Minecraft, Apex Legends, NBA 2K22, Rocket League, Overwatch 2. You can go down this list and you can see that these are on both devices. The FTC sort of mumbled something, and then Beth said, we also know that Call of Duty was on the Nintendo devices previously. I hadn't thought about that, but Ghost was like on the Wii U or something. So the whole narrative that it would be impossible for the Switch to run it, and that's newer hardware than the Wii U, I think it sort of starts to fall apart. And Beth really seemed to convince the judge on this one about the Switch deal, at least. Continuing on. The judge brought up Game Pass versus PlayStation Plus. God of War, is that on PlayStation Plus? Beth, not day and date. And if Call of Duty were on Game Pass, but not on PlayStation Plus, wouldn't that just incentivize Sony to up their game, so to speak, on the PlayStation Plus to improve the content, maybe make stuff available more immediately? In other words, it would increase competition as opposed to decrease competition because it's not available on PlayStation Plus right now. So unlike the console, it's not taking anything away from anybody. Nobody has the ability right now to just pay a subscription and get Call of Duty. The FTC paraphrased here. Well, someday Activision could put Call of Duty on PlayStation Plus if the merger doesn't go through. The judge encouraged them to play that out, how the consumer is harmed, because I still don't understand why then Sony doesn't just make their PlayStation Plus better. What have I been saying on this channel for so long? What will likely happen is that Sony is going to bolster their PlayStation Plus service, and then that ends up being a pro-competitive effect. Xbox has PlayStation Plus, Xbox has Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation has PlayStation Plus, and now consumers have more choice, and PlayStation Plus gets a little bit better. That sounds like a good thing in my mind. Continuing on. The judge pointed out that we're basically here because Call of Duty, and she reiterated this a few times. I just hesitate because they have some really great other franchises. The FTC, Weingarten, kept bringing up how they have Diablo and such. The judge says, as does Warner Brothers have the #1 game earlier this year, right, of Hogwarts. Like, you just don't know, and there are lots of other games. This industry is really different. It's amorphous, and it changes all the time, and it's completely dynamic. Other games have come and gone, like MySpace or TV shows or whatever. Why is the emphasis just so much on Call of Duty? I mean, isn't there an argument that will force someone to come up with another good annual game? After all, Mr. Kotick started from essentially nothing, but he was able to do it, right? The FTC says if they were buying a smaller game, we wouldn't be here. And the FTC also talked about how anybody would love to make a Call of Duty. Beth said, Your Honor, it's not an essential input. There's a big difference between it being necessary, which is what the case law says, and being a popular, enduring, wonderfully successful game. No one disputes that. It's one piece of content. There's no case that says one piece of content, or if one competitor gets it, there will be harm to competition. So an interesting quote there, because they kind of took you through everything. And again, the FTC didn't land that point. The judge wanted to know where this 20% come in Dr. Lee's study. And again, the FTC didn't get there on this one. So people who play Call of Duty for 20 hours a year, are they included in the data? This is just the judge's comments, right? We know that some people play 5 hours a year and some people play 20 hours, 200 hours a year. I think that's supposed to be. And you're not going to tell me that someone who plays 5 hours a year is likely to buy that Xbox just because Call of Duty is exclusive. Judge continues, a lot of people buy games and then they play them once or twice and then they never play them again, right? They play with their friend and then they never play them again. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm looking at the data, and Dr. Bailey said that a lot of people don't buy it and don't play it very much. When he's saying I put 20% in the model and it produced 5.5% share change, he's not saying that the model produced 20%. Okay, all right. I've been directing you to those paragraphs as well. So she basically got them to the point where the whole Lee study no longer persuades her, because I think she was like, how do you get a 20% shift over to Xbox? Oh, it's 5%. We're done. Put that in your report. Like a 5% market change to her doesn't seem to be significant enough to block the merger. A 20% would have been, I'm guessing. The judge thinks people would boycott if Call of Duty was removed. Judge said, we don't have these economic incentives. Those economic incentives include your brand, right? And if I recall, when I asked Dr. Lee as to whether his foreclosure model took into account the potential reputational harm of making it exclusive, you've talked about how you point to Mr. Ryan and the loyalty of these Call of Duty gamers. If their preferred platform is taken away from them, there's going to be harm. The FTC says, we saw what Microsoft did faced with reputational harm in the ZeniMax case. But I'm sorry, you just told me you can't think of another multiplayer, multi-platform game that was acquired. So actually, we just don't have anything to compare to. If people really want to play the game, they will still go to Xbox and play. They might grumble and be mad, but no one has proposed a theory that they'll just throw down the controllers and stop playing altogether. The judge says, you don't think a boycott is possible? We certainly see consumers doing it. Long story short, if they get mad enough, they will just stop supporting the brand, right? And that was the data she was looking for to prove that theory of harm. The FTC says the harm will start immediately on close. FTC, the harm will start the day the deal closes. And it will start that day because that is the day Mr. Ryan and anyone else who makes content for platforms will start looking a different way at Activision and sharing proprietary information about their platform. Who is going to contact Activision and say, great, here's my new platform. Can we optimize Call of Duty for my new platform that's going to do 6 new things? That would be great if we work together. A day after the merger, because that info goes to Microsoft. Now, Beth Wilkinson had a good rebuttal here. That's just not true with Call of Duty. As you know, there is a contract that's going through the end of 2024 that came into evidence to ensure that Call of Duty stays on PlayStation until at least then. But regardless, what Microsoft wants, there's indisputable evidence that they follow their contracts when they acquire studios. The government proved that for us. The judge said Call of Duty that's being released in November, that thing's going to happen. I guess what I'm saying is that you should address it in your submissions. So the Judge Loki just revealed that there's a new Call of Duty in November. I know everybody's shocked and surprised. Call of Duty even tweeted out the little eye emoji, but just looking at it again, I think this is one of the FTC's stronger arguments, right? But then Beth is like, that doesn't matter right now. So they just kind of moved on from that one. I wonder if I have the Nadella quote in here. The judge caught Microsoft on God of War. Beth says Sony has many of those successful games too, like God of War. Judge, did Sony develop God of War itself? Yes, but as far as I understand it, I think that's their point. Like, we wouldn't be here if Microsoft made Call of Duty. The argument is, and the theories behind the antitrust laws, and the whole case is that we don't benefit from just buying up each other. We benefit from keeping things separate and therefore incentivizing people to create themselves. Beth said, everyone who came here, whether it was from Microsoft or Activision, said it makes sense to keep them on multiple platforms. So the argument is, there's no one's denying that this game is going to be on multiple platforms. Like, nobody has said that. So the theory of harm is sort of weak, but I think those are the last two quotes that I read are two of the stronger quotes for the FTC. Now, I hope this one is the Nadella one. Beth made it clear that Call of Duty will go to other platforms. It is. This was probably my favorite one of the whole thing. If the political pressure is how we get them to distribute Call of Duty, so what? There's no dispute that Call of Duty is going to be on these services if the transaction goes through. So you asked, and I asked every one of our executives whether they would honor these contracts. They said it in open court. They said it to you under oath, and they've said it for the last year. Are they honestly suggesting that they weren't credible? That they're going to get up in a public courtroom in front of you and lie about whether they would honor these contracts? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. It really is, to suggest that Satya Nadella, he got up in your courtroom and he said he would honor it. Judge said, but he was clear that it was Mr. Spencer's decision. And Mr. Spencer said the same thing. It's not because everyone is a saint. It's because it makes economic sense and reputational sense to put that content on these different platforms. A huge flag and opinion, a very compelling argument on Beth's part, because she's pointing out that, like, look, yeah, they're not doing it because they're a saint. They're doing it because that's how they make the most money. And that model was proven with Minecraft. Minecraft is on like 20 different platforms right now, including the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. Why would they suddenly pull Minecraft or Call of Duty or whatever game? It doesn't make economic sense. So that's why the Bethesda versus Call of Duty argument, it just doesn't hold water. Those were all the quotes that I pulled, and I kept it under 40 minutes today. We're going to get out of here really quick, but there were a few housekeeping things at the end, and I'm probably going to go through and pull more for another video over the weekend, so be sure you're subscribed. But, oh, did I forget to add the quote? Withholding makes no sense. Anyway, you heard from Mr. Kotick, Mr. Spencer, Mr. Nadella that they're more successful when they put it on more platforms. This is the 20 different platforms thing. Yeah. This is why they can't find an example of another existing multi-platform multiplayer game that anyone would take off the platform, because it doesn't make sense. It makes more sense like Minecraft. Look what they do. They have it on 20 different platforms. The inference I've asked you to draw is, there is no evidence that these have any pro-competitive effects whatsoever in the marketplace. The judge says, wait a minute, how can putting Activision content on NVIDIA's cloud, how is that not positive for consumers? The FTC paraphrased, we need to do an analysis. We have to verify that. Beth, Minecraft generates more revenue on other platforms than it does on Xbox. So the FTC just got eviscerated with that point. They're like, we have to do an analysis. Beth is like, we make twice the revenue on other platforms than we do on Xbox. Their console arguments are just garbage. So like, some of the stronger stuff is about the degradation in cloud, in my opinion, but these closing arguments, people were following me, and like the people that were following the people live tweeting it were losing it, because some of them were so ridiculous. It was just insane to me. Tell me about another multi-platform, cross-platform play game. Elder Scrolls. No. Elder Scrolls and Call of Duty, like, except for in terms of sales, they're very different types of games. And I think everybody recognizes that. Even the judge recognizes that. So that didn't hold water. Now, what I meant to bring up were, when is this whole thing going to end? So June 30th, 5 p.m., that's Friday, proposed finding of facts and conclusions of law submitted. This formatting is weird, sorry. July 3rd, 12 p.m., noon on Monday, submit joint appendix of exhibits. July 4th is a holiday, so that's Tuesday. Now, July 12th is when they said the public version of proposed findings of fact and conclusion of law will be delivered. The judge made a joke. She said, I don't know when I'm going to get it out, so don't expect this to take 2 or 3 months to get the same audit. I'm sorry. That was a joke that she made to Beth, I believe. The judge said, I'll file my order under seal, and then I'll ask you to provide me jointly with your proposed redactions. Also, I'll try to write it in a way that we don't need so many redactions. So I personally don't really know how to read that, but it does sound like before the 12th. So within the next 2 weeks. I don't know how court stuff works. So I actually reached out to Hogue Law just publicly on Twitter. But if anybody has sort of inkling, that's what we know is going to happen. And we'll be keeping an eye on everything online or whatever to know. Well, everybody online will be keeping an eye out for it. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you're wondering why I'm whispering a little bit on this one, it's because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't sleep. I wanted to get this last one out for y'all. I might skip a day, take it a little bit easy, but I got a lot more quotes to share with you. If you liked any of this, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting that bell, especially if you've watched all the way to the end. If you want to become a member, support this channel, you can do so. Thank you so much to all the members who've supported. I've seen a few new ones. I got to update the list again. Click that join button right down there. I'm going to bed, but you can see day 4, and I might make a playlist and put it right here so you can just find all the days at any time. I'm going to bed. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you.